Test 49, passage 4, story time. Every culture that has adopted the cultivation of maize, also known as corn, has been radically changed by it. All right, how do we get changed by corn? You know, immediately I think about America, corn syrup. Like the obesity epidemic is largely caused by corn. This crop reshaped the cultures of the Native Americans who first cultivated it, leading to such developments as the adoption of agrarian and, in some cases, urban lifestyles, and much of the explosion of European populations after the 15th century was driven by the introduction of maize, together with another crop from the Americas, potatoes, which is also largely responsible for our obesity. Okay, so corn changes cultures. I think I totally get it. You know, you discover corn, you realize that you can cultivate it, you start cultivating it, now you have to live in the area where you cultivate the corn rather than being nomadic. You develop an agrarian lifestyle, possibly even supporting, you know, if you're good enough at growing corn, you can support a city based on that corn. So when you start growing corn, it changes your culture. That makes perfect sense. And potatoes, I'm sure, would do the same thing, but I think this passage is going to be about corn. The primary reason for this plant's profound influence is its sheer productivity. With maize, ancient agriculturalists could produce far more food per acre than with any other crop, and early Central Americans recognized and valued this characteristic of the plant. But why are maize and a few similar crops so much more bountiful than others? Modern biochemistry has revealed the physical mechanism underlying maize's impressive productivity. Oh, wow. I thought I was going to be super bored by this, but I actually now think I'm going to be kind of interested in it because I would like to know, I like plants. Well, I would like to know, why is corn so productive? And apparently, modern biochemistry has solved that riddle. So I'm expecting now to hear what it is about corn that makes it so good at making us fat, basically. To obtain hydrogen, they use in the production of carbohydrates through photosynthesis. All plants split water into its constituent elements, hydrogen and oxygen. Now, it's kind of amusing, right? Because that's a thing that everybody learns in elementary school. We all know about photosynthesis, or at least in high school. We all know about photosynthesis. We know that plants take water and split it up into hydrogen and oxygen. But they wrote that in the most convoluted possible way, right? Like the beginning of that sentence, I stumbled over it. I didn't know who they was. What? Who's they? Well, they is plants. That sentence is intentionally written poorly. That sentence should have started with all plants, right? It should have said, all plants take water and divide it up into hydrogen and oxygen and then go on. Instead, I bet they rewrote that sentence actually from the original document. I bet they took it and rewrote it to make it poorly written on purpose to see if you'll give up, to see if you'll go to sleep, to see if you'll let your eyes glaze over and not actually understand. You have to win the battle of will over the law school admission test, especially on the reading comprehension. You have to decide, like, no, fuck that. I'm the guy who understands everything. If I don't understand, it's because you wrote it poorly, but I'm still going to understand it anyway. Okay, that's the attitude that you have to take. If you decide, oh God, this stuff is so complicated, I can't possibly understand. Okay, well, you already lost. So if you want to be successful on this test, you have to decide that you're going to win that battle every time. It's not as bad as you think. It's just intentionally written poorly to see if you'll give up. Lawyers don't give up. All that sentence said is photosynthesis. They take water, they split it up into hydrogen and oxygen. So what? Well, they use the resultant hydrogen. They could have just said they use the hydrogen. They didn't need to put resultant in there. They use the hydrogen. Okay, what do they use the hydrogen for? Well, they form one of the molecules they need for energy, but the oxygen is released into the atmosphere. Okay, so water comes into the plant through the roots, presumably. Split up the water into hydrogen and oxygen. They let the oxygen go. They keep the hydrogen. What do they do with it? Well, they make one of the molecules for energy. Okay. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide that the plant takes in from the atmosphere is used to build sugars within the plant, which also sounds like energy. And I'm thinking probably that carbon dioxide gets combined with the hydrogen, because it said that they use the hydrogen to make one of the molecules they need for energy. Then it also says, yeah, and they also soak up carbon dioxide. They use that to build sugars. An enzyme Rubisco assists in the sugar-forming chemical reaction. Because of its importance in photosynthesis, Rubisco is arguably the most significant enzyme in the world. And I bet you didn't wake up today wondering about enzymes, and I wonder who's going to be on the leaderboard of enzyme importance today. But I don't give a shit whether you want to know about this or don't want to know about this. You have to know about this. This is a legal document that is on your desk. This is in your case. You need to understand this shit. So fine, the author thinks that Rubisco is really important. So important, in fact, that the author wants to go out of his way to tell you that this is the most significant enzyme in the world. Which, kind of stands to reason, given the fact that all of our food comes from plants originally. Even if we eat meat, it came from plants before it got to the meat. And so, yeah, Rubisco, if it's necessary for plants to grow, I can see how we would all be dead shit without Rubisco. Got it. Unfortunately, though, when the concentration of oxygen relative to carbon dioxide in a leaf rises to a certain level, as can happen in the presence of many common atmospheric conditions, oxygen begins to bind competitively to the enzyme. I think that means Rubisco. Oxygen starts binding competitively to the Rubisco, thus interfering with the photosynthetic reaction. So the plant is trying to get rid of the oxygen, right? That's what plants do. They take in water, sunlight, carbon dioxide. They reject oxygen. But what this says is under certain atmospheric conditions, and I don't know what that might be. High pressure, low pressure, high temperature, low temperature, dryness, wetness. I have no idea what those atmospheric conditions might be. But I do know that the oxygen that the plant's trying to get rid of starts interfering with Rubisco, which is necessary for the plant to create energy. At this point, I have a prediction about what I'm going to read next. They started off talking about maize. The question was, why is maize so productive? These biochemists apparently have a solution about why maize is so productive. And the second paragraph is all about this problem that can happen when oxygen starts to interfere with the photosynthetic reaction by binding competitively to Rubisco, which is the world's most important enzyme. See how I'm holding it all in my head? Because I've read it, I understand it. I don't need to take notes. I don't need to underline or highlight or diagram or any bullshit like that. I read it carefully. I bet that what they're going to say next is that corn has some mechanism for keeping oxygen from binding competitively to the Rubisco. Because, why would they bring up this problem if they weren't going to then say, okay, so here's why maize is so amazing, is that it solved this problem somehow. Last paragraph. Some plants, however, and I'm sure that they're referring to maize, have evolved a photosynthetic mechanism that prevents oxygen from impairing photosynthesis. No shit, y'all. If you read the first two paragraphs carefully enough, you should have been able to predict what was going to happen in the beginning of that third paragraph. These plants separate the places where they split water atoms into hydrogen and oxygen from the places where they build sugars from carbon dioxide. So now I'm imagining it's got to be maize that they're referring to here. And maize is smart enough to say, okay, see, oxygen causes a problem. We want to get rid of that shit. So when we take water in and we split it up into hydrogen and oxygen, we're going to do that in a separate department, probably close to the exit, where we can split it and get the oxygen out of there before the oxygen messes up the rest of our process. That's what I'm predicting. Water molecules are split in all plants in specialized chlorophyll-containing structures in the green leaf cells, but the rubisco is sequestered within airtight tissues in the center of the leaf. That sounds like all plants do that. So I still haven't heard where is this separation? What is it that maize is doing differently? The key to the process is that in these plants, oxygen and all other atmospheric gases are excluded from the cells containing rubisco, which is exactly what I was predicting. We got to keep the rubisco and the oxygen as far apart as possible. Now, we do have to the chlorophyll has to be there for some reason. I don't really know why. But where the separation happens, we do have chlorophyll containing structures in the green leaf cells. But let's see if the maize is like, yeah, but we're going to keep the rubisco way away from that. These cells, called the bundle sheath cells, surround the vascular structures of the leaf. What is a vascular structure of the leaf? Well, that's a structure that functions analogously to human blood vessels, which makes sense. They just use the word vascular. Now, do I know what human blood vessels do? Move blood through the body. So what do vascular structures of the leaf do? I don't know, move shit through the leaf. Carbon dioxide, which cannot enter these cells as a gas, first undergoes a series of reactions to form an intermediary non-gas molecule named C4 for the 4 carbon atoms it contains. This molecule enters the bundle sheath cells and there undergoes reactions that release the carbon dioxide that will fuel the production of carbohydrates, e.g., which means, for example, sugars. Taking its name from the intermediary molecule, the entire process is called C4 photosynthesis. Such C4 plants as sugarcane, rice, and maize are among the world's most productive crops. Now, trust me, I don't have to be a biochemist. I don't have to memorize that process. I know where it is in the passage if I need to go back and refer to it, but the exact mechanism really isn't the main point of the passage. The main point of this passage is maize is super productive because of C4 photosynthesis, which is this convoluted process that keeps oxygen away from rubisco. I don't need to know all the details. I just need to know that rubisco is the world's most important enzyme because it aids in photosynthesis. I need to know that these particularly productive plants are really good at photosynthesis because of this whole C4 process by which they keep oxygen away from the all-important rubisco. And that's what I got from this passage.